interactive session on politician, villain or victim by Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan. Just a brief about these lecture series. We started these lecture series in April 2011. This was around the same time when Anna Hazare was sitting on a hunger strike for a Lokayuk, and the whole country was talking about corruption and good governance. Therefore, appropriately enough, our first speaker in the series was none other than retired Justice Santosh Hegde, who delivered a lecture on role of Lokayuk in good governance. After him, we had a series of stalwarts like the late Justice J.S. Verma, who delivered a lecture on role of judiciary in good governance. Dr. Dilip Padgaonkar, Mr. Vinod Dua, Ms. Sanita Deshmukh spoke in a panel discussion on role of media in good governance. Mr. J.M. Lindo delivered a lecture on good governance, need for electoral reforms. Ms. Aruna Roy and Nikhil Day delivered a lecture on the challenge of fighting corruption and redressing grievances. Mr. Kiran Karnik delivered a lecture on good governance, technology as a tool. Mr. Shailesh Gandhi spoke on RTI in good governance, and Mr. S.Y. Qureshi delivered a lecture on democracy at crossroads with electoral reforms. Today, of course, we are very privileged to have Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan with us. We are also very grateful to our life trustees, Mr. Yanthu Kaporkar, Mr. Srinivas Rempo, and Mr. Dr. Rasal Gaudar, for continuously supporting us to organize these lectures. I'm also very thankful to Mr. Pratap Singh Rane, President ICJ and Leader Opposition, Goa Legislative Assembly, for accepting our invite to chair the session and deliver the introductory remarks. But before that, it is my proud privilege to welcome Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan today and to introduce him to you. Of course, his CV runs into many pages, and this is just a synopsis. Dr. Narayan is a former bureaucrat, now politician, political reformer and columnist, founder and the president of Satta party, and MLA, Kukatpally constituency, Andra Pradesh Legislative Assembly. As a practitioner and champion of clean politics and citizen-centered governance, he is a renowned national figure and a popular youth icon. He is a physician by training who went into the Indian Administrative Service in the aftermath of the emergency and failure of the Janta experiment and topped the IAS exam. Some of his major accomplishments while in government are: as Joint Collector, he worked for the speedy rehabilitation of 8,000 youth from displaced families of Visakhapatnam steel plant. As Collector of Prakasham district, he was instrumental in the creation of a record 2 lakh acres of irrigation, the largest such program with direct participation of people. As Collector of East Godavari district, he spearheaded the reconstruction of drainage and irrigation network in Krishna and Godavari deltas. His other accomplishments include several major policy initiatives, including empowerment of parents in schools, speedy justice through rural courts, economic reform and restructuring of Andhra Pradesh, development of the Infocity in Hyderabad, the much acclaimed law for self-reliant cooperatives, empowerment of local governments and stakeholders. In spite of an impressive personal achievement, Dr. Narayan's experience in government convinced him that faulty governance process was the biggest hurdle to India and Indians achieving greater success. And what India needs today is a fundamental change in the rules of the game and not a periodic change of players. Dr. Narayan has been felicitated with several laurels. He has also served on several important national panels that are widely acknowledged to have made decisive contributions to governance and democratic reforms in India. He was also instrumental in holding the round table on Lokpal institution held in New Delhi on April 24, 2011. He is a long-standing and leading advocate for the creation of an all-India judicial service and National Judicial Commission, and has worked closely with Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya, late Justice J.S. Verma, both Chief Justices of India, and Justice B.R. Krishna Iyer, former Supreme Court Judge. Please welcome Dr. Narayan with a round of applause. Before I ask Dr. Narayan to deliver his lecture, may I request Mr. Pratap Singh Rane to give the introductory remarks.
Good evening, everybody. Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, Mrs. Nandini Sai, Dr. Dubashi, and my friends. As you know, some interactive session of the Goa International Center on Good Governance. Started in April 2011, as already mentioned by Nandini Sai. I find the topic of this lecture is very interesting, especially because it will be elaborated upon by a person who has been on both sides of the government, a former bureaucrat and a present politician. He is not only a bureaucrat, he is a doctor turned the medical doctor, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan. Politician is usually a person who is involved in influencing public policy and decision making, who is generally perceived as a villain and not as a victim. Also, we see today, in today's world, especially in our country, every day we hear of so many things happening and the politicians getting the blame for it. This is primarily because the position or offices that any politician holds are also understood to be used for his personal gains more than for the benefit of the society. It is said that we get what we deserve. Today, the media or the fourth estate is involved in creating, to a great extent, public opinion. It's a powerful media today with the electronic media, the written media, and so forth. It is high time that we, the people, insist on political and electoral reforms. Along with it, I would also add judicial reforms. Because you see, I'll give you an example. I went to a small country in northern part of India, in the lap of the Himalayas, called Bhutan. You enter there, and it says, "Welcome to the country of gross national happiness." In that country, it's a kingdom. The king was good enough. There is a democracy, and they have elections to their parliament. But those who fight the parliament elections, the candidates are supposed to be graduates. They must be educated. And also, along with it, that they should not have any criminal background. This is something very, very important that we should take a note of. Because I don't know, I mean, how many percent, I dare not mention the percentage, right from parliament to other places. Many of our, especially the assemblies, perhaps, many of our legislators, parliamentarians, have a criminal background. Sometimes the charges are very, very serious. It is high time that we also think in the lines of which we need to create an opinion among the people of our country. During my 4 decades in politics, I have known people, politicians and bureaucrats, who are incredibly honest and motivated. It is because of these people, the largest democracy like ours is moving ahead, in spite of the difficulties. much has been achieved in our democracy, and I am confident that time will soon be right when people of India will think on the lines of the needed reforms. And it is deliberations like these which facilitate the public awareness and the mindset transformation towards socio-economic well-being of people. I hope this lecture will have a precision of thinking in shaping our perception, without being a barrier between you and Dr. Narayan. I convey my best wishes to you, Dr. Narayan, in your future endeavors, and invite you to deliver today's good governance lecture. Thank you for giving me a patient hearing.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hyde and friends, I am truly delighted to be with you all. I deem it an honor to be part of this lecture series. When I was going through the list of names that Mr. Hyde read out, I have known each of them and several of them for a long, long time. A few of them quite intimately. That makes me think about the nature of public discourse in this country. One of the challenges of India is that public discourse has become very incestuous. There are very few people who are focusing attention on some of these critical issues. And everywhere you go for a national conference, for any serious deliberation, even a national committee or any other expert body, it's roughly the same group of people. It's not a very good thing for a country of 1.2 billion people. The second thing is, increasingly, among most of these people, there are very rigid attitudes, not based on evidence and logic, but based on assumptions and knee-jerk responses and transient populism. I have chosen a very provocative topic deliberately because I know the general tenor of discussion in this country when you deal with governance and governance crisis and so on and so forth. But my belief is that if we are to really be a part of the solution, then the analysis must lend itself to a solution. It must not further complicate the problem and make it impossible for us to find a realistic, a credible answer, a set of doable solutions, not some platitudes and some generalities about human condition and morality and so on and so forth. Because if all human beings are moral, we don't require all this discussion. Most human beings tend to be moral. But there are always going to be some people, and there have been throughout history, in all ages, in all civilizations, who will stray for personal gain. Morality is essentially a function of reconciliation between the individual greed and societal need. We may use all kinds of languages, we may use religious idiom and spiritualism and so on and so forth, but at the end of the day, it's all about reconciling individual greed with societal need, because human beings are frail. They're bound to be. The bulk of them at any rate. So how do we build institutions to ensure that the best outcome is possible for everyone without undermining individual liberty? That is the challenge of statecraft throughout history, from Plato to current day, from Kautilya to Machiavelli. And therefore, analysis must actually lead to a sensible set of practical solutions that will work. It's all about incentives. It is with this belief that I have chosen this particular theme, provocative though it is. In all societies, politicians have revived. One of the favorite pastimes in any polite society is to simply debunk politicians. And it's not peculiar to this country. Long ago, there were two great statesmen in Britain. Many of you will recall their names if you have students of British history. Disraeli and Gladstone. They were great rivals politically, but great statesmen both were nonetheless. So one day somebody asked Disraeli about Gladstone. No, I'm sorry. Somebody asked Disraeli about the difference between a misfortune and a calamity. Disraeli said, young man, if Gladstone were to fall into the river Thames, that would be misfortune. But if somebody saves him, that would be a calamity. We feel exactly the same way about every one of our politicians. I actually remember scores of conversations after December 13, 2001, if you remember. That infamous episode when the Parliament of India was attacked. Only recently, some of the culprits were hanged. 2001, December 13. I have witnessed hundreds of conversations where many people wistfully said, if only the terrorists succeeded in their mission. If only these chaps actually were successful in bumping off a few of these politicians. There's so much anger, so much of bad blood, so much hatred and venom that we'd love to see our politicians come to harm. There was a chaplain of the US Senate called Reverend Haley, a very famous man. And one day somebody asked the Reverend in a gathering like this, he said, Reverend, when you pray every morning in the US Senate, do you pray for the senators? He said, oh no, I look at the senators' faces and I pray for the country, he said. And we all feel the same way when we see the shenanigans of a parliament or a state legislature or elected representatives, wherever they are. But let's take a deep breath and reflect a little more carefully. Is it our case that politicians as a class are particularly venal and corrupt and obnoxious human beings, and somehow by a process of social selection, the worst of these people have actually gone into politics? Is it our case that everybody from a panchayat sarpanch to a municipal councillor to a legislator to a parliamentarian to a minister to the prime minister, everybody is rotten, whereas those of the outside are by definition angelic? Just imagine, does it make any sense? Is it our case that the moment somebody enters politics, he becomes somehow rotten, and the moment somebody stays away from politics out of cowardice or complete nonchalance about society, then that person is a moral giant? What are we talking about? Mahatma Gandhi was a politician. The moment we talk about public policy, as Mr. Gandhi said, the moment we talk about resources and their utilization, the moment we talk about priorities, the moment we talk about the next generation, we are into politics. We may not use the idiom of politics as understood in this country. But the moment I say, I want health care for every single child in this country, every person in this country, I want education of quality available to every single child in this country, irrespective of circumstances of birth, I am talking politics. We are all talking politics. Some of this debunking of politics, because of our narrow appreciation of what politics is about, and thinking that politician is the problem, has actually aggravated the crisis in this country. And that's the point I wanted to make. I know it's a very controversial one. I know in polite society, in middle class society in India, anybody who dares to say that will be debunked and attacked and vilified. But I think this debate has to be carried forward. I think we all have to really understand where the problem lies and how to therefore find a solution which is realistic, which is credible, which is practical, which is workable. It's in that spirit that I'm going to make a few comments. By now you would have understood that I do not mince words. I speak the truth as I believe it is. I don't tailor truth to an audience. And therefore, if some of my comments are a little harsh or caustic, please forgive me. It's in the spirit of this larger discussion, which is so relevant for our country, for our national life, that I'm saying what I'm saying today. First, if you look at the three classes of people who are entrusted with the governance of India, the politicians, the bureaucrats, and the judges, I would argue, and I'm deliberately saying this again, I would argue, while politicians are guilty, they are actually the least guilty of the three classes of people. Because the politician, at least, his guilt is mitigated, his culpability is mitigated by very serious extenuating circumstances, because increasingly, again I'm making this point with extreme seriousness, increasingly honesty is incompatible with political survival. And therefore a politician can say, look, I did the following things even though I knew that they were not right because political compulsions demanded that. It's not excusable, but there is a genuine problem there. Until we liberate the politician out of this terrible dilemma of the public good versus political survival. As long as they seem to be in conflict, there is a problem. We are expecting the politician to be a superhuman being if you want him to behave persistently in furtherance of public good, even at the cost of political future. So there is a deeper problem. Therefore, the politician's guilt is mitigated. But a bureaucrat in this country, Professor Gabashi knows and I know, is a son-in-law of the government. He's not even the son. Once he or she makes an entry into the civil services by accident, by hard work, by repeated attempts or whatever, the person is more or less invulnerable for the next 35 years. He'll almost certainly rise to the top, irrespective of how incompetent and corrupt the person is. Unless he's caught with a loaded gun near a corpse, even then it's likely that he might actually escape the gallows. The bureaucrat cannot claim that his survival depends on compromise. He is more guilty. I'm making this point deliberately to provoke you into thinking. But even the bureaucrat can claim that while his survival does not depend on compromise, his sense of well-being does. Because once you invest a lot of energy and enthusiasm and emotion into a certain assignment, if you are transferred from pillar to post every other day because you did not really see eye to eye with the political bosses, then there is some amount of serious discomfort which you cannot discount. And therefore, the bureaucrat too has some amount of mitigating circumstances, not as much as the politician. But what about the judge, whom we all venerate? Most people in India, the middle classes, think that the judiciary is the solution to India's problems. I dare say judiciary is actually a huge part of the problem. Because judges are completely invulnerable to political vagaries. Neither the judge's tenure in office nor his functioning on a day-to-day basis is ever affected by politics, because they are totally insulated from political process in this country. They are given the kind of protection unmatched in the world, because even the United States, the Supreme Court has never really created a new kind of law, arrogated the power to itself of appointing its successors. And here the judiciary even appoints its own successors. They have perverted the Constitution completely. What they say is final. And because of the anger against politics and politicians, the public opinion actually has been favoring the judiciary even when they're transgressing the elementary principles of the Constitution of this country. And yet, the outcomes in judiciary, in terms of delay, incompetence, corruption, somebody has to say this publicly and repeatedly, corruption is as grotesque, as gross, as it is in politics and bureaucracy. The broader point I'd like to make is there's a deeper systemic crisis. If we simply vilify X, Y, Z, and if we simply congratulate ourselves for being very decent human beings and great citizens as opposed to these guys, these folks, these rascals, then we're not really solving the problem. We have to figure out the problem, and we have to find an answer. Look at what we've done in the past 60 plus years as a democracy. Myron Weiner, a very distinguished sociologist and political scientist who passed away some years ago, he was at MIT. He wrote very evocatively about the state and the child in India. He is a man who 40 years ago or so focused on education in this country and child labor, and how it's the most important thing to ensure that the child gets an opportunity to have next years of schooling, and how most of the political class in India and the public discourse in the country, including the Marxists, they have completely undermined the children's future. And they actually coined an expression, the psychology of caste. Myron Weiner, in a different context, he came up with 4 yardsticks, 4 touchstones to measure a democracy, because you obviously cannot allow a country to claim a democracy by simply having the name in its title. And quite interestingly, I don't think I'm really too far wrong, but I'm sure we can do research. Every country that has in its title the word democracy or people is a terrible, tyrannical dictatorship. I am not able to find a single exception out of the 190 or so member nations of United Nations. Every single country which has in its official title people or democracy or democratic is a tyranny. So what you call yourself does not make you a democracy. He gave 4 yardsticks. 1, competitive elections. 2, political freedoms. 3, peaceful transfer of power, and the winners do not punish losers merely because they won the election. As Nawaz Sharif, what happened earlier, of course, Bhutto's case is well known. And again, what will happen to Nawaz Sharif if he really pursues some of his agenda? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Let's hope that he will not come to grief again. And 4, the elected government is truly an authority, not a military junta or a coterie or an elected group of people. But elections actually matter in affecting the outcomes. These are the 4 yardsticks. By these 4 yardsticks, whatever we call ourselves, whatever we say of ourselves, we are a robust democracy. We must first acknowledge that. And our democracy has actually worked pretty well over the past 60 years. Of course, there are many distortions, and I probably have worked longer and more assiduously and more untiringly and more uncompromisingly to set right our democracy's perversions than most people in this country. Though it's not that I'm unaware of the follies of democracy, but let's recognize the strengths. Let's recognize the accomplishments. Look at the integration of Indian states. Italy took 23 years of statesmanship and enormous struggle of great men and women to unify just 9 Italian-speaking states between 1843, 1848 and 1871. Germany took 9 years of blood and iron and the sacrifice of the lives of tens of thousands of German people to unify 39 German-speaking provinces and Bismarck's leadership. Look at India. There was never a nation like India in human history. The kind of diversity that you cannot even fathom. The multiplicity of languages, the culture, the skin color, the races, of course the religions and the castes and the subcastes is unprecedented in human history. And there were more than 540 princely states. They were all unified in a period of about 15 to 18 months, with hardly a drop of blood being shed. Only in the state of Hyderabad, from where I come right now, was there police action and actual use of weapons, and even in that, the Indian army lost only fewer than 10 soldiers. It's unprecedented in human history what was accomplished. Unification of India. The India project was an extraordinary one. Look at the languages in this country. Pakistan was dismembered in 25 years. Sri Lanka, because they could not accommodate one more language, the Tamil, you've seen for decades enormous strife and suffering and bloodshed, and only now they are now picking up the pieces. Belgium, a tiny country where there are 2 linguistic groups, the Flemish people who speak the Dutch language and the French-speaking people. A tiny country, comparable to one of our smaller states. They're not able to form a government for years. Canada, a remarkably progressive country, with just one other language apart from English, French-speaking people in Quebec. And every once in a while, you hear about a possible secession. The nation may be dismembered any time. And look at India. And look at the remarkable accomplishment of bringing 22 languages together. And without any serious discord. It's unthinkable anywhere else in the world that 22 languages could actually come together and form a nation and would not find a serious barrier to communication or politics or nation building. It's unthinkable. It's absolutely unprecedented. The linguistic reorganization of states, the preservation of political freedoms, the nurturing of democracy in an extremely hostile environment, a caste-ridden, abjectly poor, largely illiterate society. Because never before was universal franchise extended to a society with these attributes. It was a phenomenal leap of faith, which has largely worked. And with all this, while the economic growth rate was simply nowhere near our potential, it was not terrible either. We did have sustained, moderate rates of growth. On occasion, decent growth rates. Yes, certainly government policies were obstructive most of the time. There was lack of wisdom. The priorities are skewed. They were skewed then. They continue to be skewed now. There's much to criticize them for. But on the whole, there was actually growth. These are not insignificant accomplishments. Yes, we deserve a lot more. Yes, we must aspire for something much more. Yes, we have, as a nation, in some respects, we have failed spectacularly. But only when we recognize the strengths and understand the weaknesses can we overcome the weaknesses and build on the strengths. Otherwise, we'll become a nation of wailers and complainers, and that doesn't really help. Even in the past 15, 16 years, I have been in this work relating to governance reform of India since 1996 when I left government, deliberately to build a movement and to work systematically for political and governance reforms in this country. Certainly my dream was that by now a lot more would happen and India would be largely free from the kinds of ills of politics that we see. That has not been yet realized. I do hope it will be realized in the coming years, but nevertheless, in the past 16, 17 years, significant achievements have happened. India is not standing still. It may be inadequate, but we're not standing still. Take the issue of voter registration. I worked longer and harder on this simple issue, and by the way, it's nothing to do with politicians. The politicians of India have never stopped improvement of voter registration. They have no role on that. Election Commission has the complete power under the current law of the land, if only they simply improved the procedures. And the hardest work I had to do in this country to make something happen was persuading the Election Commission, some of whose worthies were here. They're great personal friends of mine. But they haven't done really enough to even ensure that every single voter would at least have an accessible, citizen-friendly, permanently verifiable voter registration process. They tell me, when you attack politicians day in and day out for their failings, when everything is under your control, there's no political pressure, you have the legal power, you have the obligation, why have you failed in this simple task? Things have improved in the past 15 years, significantly, and not yet totally. At one time, I remember, there was a big fight between the Postal Department and the Election Commission, because we were urging them, look, you create a permanent facility for the citizens to be able to access and to know whether the name is registered or not, and if it's not registered, to quickly ensure that the name is registered. And post office seems to be one candidate, because that's about the only public office which any Indian can enter, rich or poor, urban or rural, Hindu or Muslim, male or female, without any trepidation, without any fear, and in most cases without any corruption. Things happen routinely. Therefore, create that mechanism. You know, for 2 years, the Election Commission and the Post Office could not communicate with each other because they were deciding who should write to whom first. The Election Commission said, we are a constitutional authority, therefore they must come to us. The Post Office fellow said, they need our services, therefore they must come to us. For 2 years, they did not talk to each other. One day, in a meeting like this in Jaipur, I remember, then Chief Election Commissioner, my good friend Lindo, was sitting there, and I was addressing, and I had to use some extremely unparliamentary language I dare not repeat here. I said, Mr. Chief Election Commissioner, get off your passion. You are a servant of the people. For heaven's sake, don't stand on form and prestige. Deliver. Then, of course, the wheels move up to a point. This is just to tell you, it's not politics alone. Let's not think that whatever is wrong with the country is entirely because of the crooked politicians. Of course, there are crooked politicians. Of course, there are many distortions in politics. But you are oversimplifying it. By overstating the case or making it impossible to solve the problem. But still, I should report happily that there is an 80 to 90% improvement. We still don't have anywhere near the kind of framework that we deserve and we are capable of creating, but it's improved quite considerably. Take the disclosure of candidate details. When I came up with a list of candidates in Andra Pradesh, contesting for state legislature and parliament in 1998-99, 42 names were revealed with impeccable evidence. clinching evidence based on established benchmarks in a totally verifiable, objective, and highly credible process, it created a sensation. Then the matter went to the courts gave a ruling in 2002, 2000. All the parties said, nothing doing, we cannot disclose the candidates' details. Then we led a movement, and finally we won. And today, every single candidate for electoral office in this country has to disclose his or her antecedents. It's not a revolution, but it's an important step forward. We could at least put a stop to further criminalization, which Rani is talking of criminalization. Now the parties are very defensive because to now nominate a new criminal is very hard for them. Existing criminals have sanitized their records. They have struck deep roots in politics, therefore political parties cannot do without them. But they dare not now bring in new criminals with criminal record as candidates. It's very, very difficult. So one important step, not enough, but something happened. Take the political funding reform, the wake up Tehelka. We met every single major leader in the country, the ruling party and opposition, and said, look, I don't know if you all recall the Tehelka episode, very much like the current episodes. There was a scam at the time, Kargil war and the coffins and other things, defense equipment, and so on and so forth. So I remember meeting George Fernandez himself and many others and telling them, look, we're not here to judge you. Whether you've done something wrong or not wrong, let the parliament decide, the courts decide. But the fact of the matter is, today, in order to run politics, you have to depend on that money and cash transactions because there's no framework for legitimate raising of resources for honest politics. It's absurd. Let's at least use this as an opportunity to clean up one part of politics, namely, you can raise honest money for honest politics. Today, it's impossible. That day. And the parties came together. Congress party appointed a committee headed by Dr. Manmohan Singh, incidentally. And we worked with that committee. And all the recommendations of that committee of Congress party were fully accepted by the NDA government in power at the time. And by unanimous consent, a law was enacted in 2003. I do not know if you are aware, India has one of the finest frameworks for political funding in the world. If it is United States, such a law would have actually transformed politics completely. But India has much more complex political crisis. Therefore, while that law is necessary, it's wholly insufficient because the problem is much deeper. But today, if a political party wants to actually mobilize honest resources for honest politics, today the framework exists. There are elements of that law which are very good, which are not yet implemented, namely free airtime for recognized political parties, because once you take away the dishonest money for dishonest purposes in elections, I'll come to that later. What is the major cost of electioneering in modern world? Television. Why is the United States spending so much money in elections? Television. Once the television and electronic media access is available without cost, as a matter of right for legitimate electoral campaign, most of the problem is over. And the law is in place, except that this part is not yet implemented, though the incentive for funding part is implemented. Take, for instance, the 91st Amendment to the Constitution. The anti-defection provisions were tightened significantly. And that's the reason why whenever people want to defect, now they have to resign necessarily and contest again. Earlier, if you remember, wholesale, they could simply jump from this club. And the Council of Ministers size is limited. There were times when we had jumbo jet ministries. I think in one of the northeastern states, I think Meghalaya at one stage, out of the 46 legislators, 44 were ministers. The only ones who were not ministers were the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker. In Andra Pradesh, we had 90 ministers. Anjay was the Chief Minister. Today, by Constitution, it's not possible. We argued for 10% at the lower house strength. Today, it's 15%. Take, for instance, the Right to Information Act, of which I was privileged to be the person along with Raghunath Roy to draft it and get it approved in the National Advisory Council. And they're very balanced legislation, an extremely sound legislation, a far-sighted legislation. Take, for instance, the local courts law, the Gram Nyaya Act, which is still unimplemented in large parts of the country, though the parliament mandates that it shall be implemented. But the law exists for speedy justice, at least for simple cases in this country. Take, for instance, the 97th Amendment to the Constitution, whereby the cooperatives are now liberated from the clutches of government. I have fought for it for a long time, along with Dr. Kurian, icon for many of us and for me a personal hero. and others. And finally, the Constitution was actually enacted in December 2012. It took 7-8 years for us, but it happened nevertheless. I can go on and on. The point I'm making is the political system is trying to make a response. The local legislation now on the anvil, and the service guarantee legislation, the National Judicial Commission for the judicial appointments, the higher courts, the Indian Judicial Service, all these are now in the pipeline. And yet there's a lot of angst in this country. Yet all of us are deeply discomfited. We're all extremely wary about the way the country's trajectory is going. I would like to urge you to go back to 1950s and look at the initial conditions of our democracy. This is my concluding portion, then can have an interaction. There are 3 unique conditions to India when we got ourselves universal franchise. 1, abject poverty and illiteracy. No other country with such poverty and illiteracy got universal franchise. We were the first. 2, in the colonial era, even the simplest services from the government were beyond the reach of the people, most of the people. Without sifarish, without a bribe, without going 20 or 30 or 40 times to the official, you would not get even the smallest thing done. A birth certificate, a ration card, or a caste certificate, or anything else which you're entitled to get. A water connection, a sewerage connection, an electricity connection, anything. Even when there's a fee payment involved and you pay the fee, things simply don't happen. That's the tradition that we established. Where to get the simplest things done, you have to really do something Herculean or pay a huge price. And 3, a high degree of centralization. All these problems could have been corrected if you actually empowered the local communities. This state is an example. It's 1.4 million population. In many ways, it's almost like a local government. I don't mean any offense. But because it's created as a state or union territory earlier, in effect it's like a local government, with so many subunits of local government. And therefore, even if things went wrong, enough leadership could emerge. We never give ourselves a chance in this country. We centralized power so enormously throughout our history, despite the 73rd and 74th amendments to the Constitution. And those amendments, well meant though they are, they're a bit of a farce. I was doing a word count the other day. If you take the American Constitution, the original Constitution had 4,700 words. With all the amendments, 15 amendments subsequently, the Constitution of the United States now stands at 7,400 words. The 73rd, 74th amendments themselves have 7,700 words. And yet, they created overstructured, underpowered, inconsequential local governments. So it doesn't really count. We haven't yet institutionalized local government whereby things could happen. Once these 3 things are there, poor service delivery, abject poverty and illiteracy, and therefore absence of the notion of citizenship, and high degree of centralization, I'm arguing that whatever subsequently happened in terms of political decline is almost mathematical. It's inevitable. It's logical. Take any society on earth, white or black, Negroid or Mongoloid, or any Caucasian, doesn't matter who they are, where they come from. Any society, take these conditions and then give universal franchise without setting these conditions right. What happened in India is an inevitable consequence in those societies, particularly if you also are burdened with an electoral system that we are given. There's nothing unique about what happened in our country. It is logical. Once a legislator is elected in this framework, the people had only one recourse to get even the smallest things done because nobody would listen to them. He only has one source of power. I gave Mr. Rane the vote. I don't care what happens, who is supposed to do what, but he must deliver for me all these things. The ration card, the caste certificate, the drain in front of the house, the road, whether it's the legislator's job or the local government's job or the parliamentarian's job, I don't know. But somebody must do it. Because I'm too small. Nobody listens to me. Things don't happen. Enormous extortions are there. I can't afford to pay that bribe. I can't go 20 times. I don't have any other influence. You are elected. You got my vote. People understood that smartly. So what happened? The legislator was therefore compelled to create an army of party cadres to address these grievances. Now there are two problems with this. A, this army has no other source of livelihood. They are expected to work near full time. Even when I am in Goa or somewhere else, I get a phone call saying, sir, the power is off. Will you do something about it? Try telling him that it's not the legislator's job to ensure that the local fuse call office functions properly. Try to tell them that, look, the garbage disposal in front of your house is not really the legislator's job, that's not the reason why you have to legislate. Try telling him that. He doesn't know where to go to. Try telling that the choke drain there is not really a state level function, it's actually at the ward level or the mahalla level function. Impossible. People want that because people are desperate, they have no other recourse available. And in order to address these grievances, you require an army of people. During freedom struggle, you have people who are willing to sacrifice a great deal. It was easier because Bharat Mata was a great deity. And sacrifice for Mother India was something very noble. It's easy to arouse that emotion. And in any case, without anywhere denigrating the freedom fighters, in a stagnant economy, the sacrifice was actually much less than what we imagine. Except that your personal freedom is lost, most of the economic wealth creation was no real creation. It was a stagnant economy, agrarian economy. If I didn't take care of my farm, somebody else did. There's no greater impact on productivity than that. Yes, my personal freedom, my sense of comfort, they're affected. There's no question about the sacrifice. But economically, the loss was insignificant. Imagine in today's world, you give up 5 years, 3 years of your life, 10 years of your life, it's like a lifetime. In a fast-growing world. To expect people to sacrifice on that scale is absurd. Inevitably, corruption crept in. In order to feed them, you have to allow them to make money because you have access to power. Land deals, mining these days. But even earlier, transfers and postings, contracts and tenders, police cases, land, natural resources. They became a plaything of politics, inevitably. Legislators in my state tell me it takes, for most of them, 10 lakh rupees a day to run their politics. Legislators. Ordinary legislators. Absurd. It's absurd. How do you do that? I personally feel it's a bit of an exaggeration. I'm sorry, no. 10 lakh rupees a month. 10 lakh a day is too high. 10 lakh rupees a month, it takes them for doing their politics. After election, in interregnum, for those 5 years. Typically, they spend in states like Andra Pradesh and Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, 5 to 10 crores for a state legislative office, each of them. There are constituencies where 80 crores was spent in a by-election. Assembly constituency I'm talking about. Because without that, you cannot sustain politics, for most of them. You may show an odd example of somebody who is elected without that kind of money, and then say, but it's happening. But these are huge exceptions. In all of Andhra Pradesh and probably Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, I am the sole exception who spent only 4.5 lakhs and got elected without giving a single rupee to your voter. That exception cannot be the norm. That is exception. The people are time and again saying, this is not something we will repeat. Therefore, inevitably, corruption became endemic in the system. The second part is, in a hostile system where nothing gets delivered, this political machine is trying to get some delivery without changing the way of delivering. You are actually swimming against the stream, against the current. And therefore, even with all this investment in time and energy and hard work, the outcomes are only marginal. You only get 10-20% result. I remember Ms. Sonia Gandhi one day complaining to some of us over lunch. She said that I went to Raebareli the other day. For 5 days I toured the constituency. This was I think in 2005 or so, maybe actually 2006. And everywhere hundreds flock. And when I try and listen to somebody, pay attention to one complaint, then some of the 10 voices are raised. When I try and address them, then another 10 voices raised. It's absolutely befuddling. I don't know how to deal with these things. I don't know what an MP does. At least in my case, I can pick up the telephone and call a minister, a central minister, and at least get some big thing done and then tell them, look, because you have me as a representative, I can get some big things done. But how do you run the system? This is a real problem. For everybody, for a legislator at the state level, for the parliamentarian, for a minister, for a chief minister, for a prime minister. And therefore, come election time, people are always disappointed. Because even if you invested all that energy and time and resources, your delivery is only marginal. Because you haven't built a system to actually deliver. And therefore, dissatisfaction is inevitable. Two things happen. The good people in politics, the first generation politicians, and some of them still remain with us, men and women of great integrity and commitment to the country. But increasingly they were marginalized because they could not survive in this climate. They left, or they were thrown out. And even after all this, election time, every time you are a legislator in office, almost always you face anti-incumbency. If you realize, even if the same party comes back to office in this country, 60 to 65% of incumbent legislators are thrown out of office. What is called disaggregate volatility. A very large number of people are thrown out of office, even if the same party is returned to office. Oftentimes another party comes. But if the same party comes to office, 60 to 65% of the incumbent legislators are thrown out of office because of this. And in order to buck this trend, parties have learned the art of driving the voters. Therefore, vote buying. In a poor country, money matters after all. In states like Andra Pradesh and Karnataka, 1,000 rupees per vote is not at all uncommon by each party. If there are 3-4 voters in the household, if there are 3 parties in the fray, 10,000-12,000 rupees in India for an abjectly poor family is a very substantial sum in one election. You go and give them bhashans, it doesn't really help. The other day, one minister came to me and said, sir, until now I used to think that whatever Dr. JP is saying, it will happen. If not today, there's a 10% chance of happening in the next few years. Now, after seeing this by-election, he came up with this after a by-election where he was in charge. Now, sir, my hopes are even further down. I said, what happened? He said, 80 crores is spent in this particular constituency by 3 major candidates. Our party, this being Congress, our party was losing, we realized that. And therefore, we thought we would cut our losses, don't spend too much money. And we said we will only give money to our voters because we have a fair idea of who are going to be our likely voters. And all our Karakatas, our party cadres, they said nothing, no, you must pay to everybody. We said why? They said every party is paying every party's voters. Now if we don't pay them, they will not pay us next time. You better pay. Therefore we are compelled to pay, and we spent for a losing campaign, knowing full well we are going to lose 24 crores in that particular case. These are hard, real numbers. These are extreme numbers. I'm not saying this is common, but 5 crores is not a small number, for heaven's sake, for a state legislative office. 20 crores is not a small number for a Lok Sabha seat. And that's pretty much the norm, I can tell you. Even in a state like Jammu and Kashmir, I just now asked Mr. Rane how it is in Goa. Goa being more literate and people are being much more aware. The numbers spoken are small. He's talking about 8 lakhs per assembly constituency. There are 40 constituencies in your state of about 1.4 million. Assuming this is equivalent to 2 assembly constituencies elsewhere in a state like Andra Pradesh. There, one party spends typically about 10 crores.
This is legally
8 lakhs is permissible?
White money.
Oh, I asked that, but actual cost, not the legal cost. I stand corrected. I was impressed actually because I thought this number was actually pretty modest. But the other day, I was talking to a Jammu and Kashmir journalist, and he told me that in the last Jammu and Kashmir assembly election, the ruling party National Conference paid 500 rupees per vote, and PDP in opposition paid 300 rupees per vote. I was shocked. I was shocked because I thought Jammu and Kashmir at least is immune from this because there's this whole Hindu-Muslim issue, India-Pakistan, terrorism, all kinds of stuff. And therefore, money is not an engine of politics. But I discovered that that state is no exception. That is when I realized Jammu and Kashmir will never secede from India. It has become mainstream part of this country, politically speaking. Do we have this vicious cycle? As I said, This could have been broken if only you had local governments which are truly empowered from the beginning. Then and now, we failed to do that. And now, it's much harder because there are two enemies of local government. The legislator at the state level, he hates local government. The bureaucrat at the state level hates the local government. The IAS officer and the MLA are the great enemies of the local governments because their relevance is substantially reduced. And no matter what you say or do, how much of a constitutional thinker you do, unless there's tremendous political will, it's very difficult to institutionalize local governments in this country. And unless we rethink what to do and how to do, we will not solve the problem. And that's my very last point. In today's politics, A, it is money power. B, because all parties are now indulging in this vote buying in most parts of the country, freebies and short-term, I give you free rice, free power, free this, free that, short-term freebies. And in any society, in a democracy, there's always a clash between the short-term political price that a government has to pay and the long-term public good it has to pursue. It is the logic of democratic politics. Try to tell your child facing examinations 3 months later that she must not watch television because her future depends on her study and discipline now. You become a very unpopular person. There's actually a vote. Who should take care of the children? I think most parents will be out. Luckily, there's no democracy in running a family. And therefore, you can actually pursue the child's self-interest, future self-interest, even at the cost of inflicting some pain on her today. And the bond of love and family ultimately keeps it united. But in democratic politics, vote, that's not possible. Therefore, leadership has to be that much more capable. It's easy to offer the short-term freebies, particularly in a poor country. It's easy enough in a rich country too. Now all parties are offering freebies, therefore even that is no longer a deciding factor. And therefore wherever possible, fragment society, caste, region, religion, language, reservations, take anything and fashion a vote bank around identity of some kind or other. And once identity is there in an extremely diverse country like India, people forget everything else. You need to feel as a crook or a murderer or a criminal. We talk about criminals, but every criminal who comes into politics styles himself as a caste leader first. Once he has money, once he is a caste leader and therefore seen as a do-gooder for the particular caste, etc., he is no longer seen as a criminal, he is a powerful. And that's the reason why criminals get elected more often than non-criminals. Lalu Yadav during the his heyday, if you remember Madhepura election, he lost when his party was powerful and popular. But subsequently, when Pappu Yadav contested in the same constituency, even after Lalu Yadav lost his shield, as Lalu's candidate, he won hands down. Madhepura. The Pappu Yadav is now acquitted by the higher courts for want of evidence. So there is evidence to show that for a variety of reasons, people actually are electing criminals in certain cases. There's a complex chemistry at work there, for a variety of reasons. Therefore, money, freebies, and divisions in society, political fragmentation, primordial loyalties, identity politics, these have become the currency of politics today. The best and the brightest, obviously, are increasingly finding it very difficult to have political foothold. And they are unelectable, therefore parties at best give them some respect and say, yeah, you can draft a party agenda, platform, or manifesto. If there is an opportunity, we'll put you in the legislative council or Rajya Sabha, but let us say, or a nominated post, but you're not fit for elections. It's a very clear understanding now in the country. All these need to be addressed. That means you must reverse the initial conditions. You must have service guarantees. You must create, at least even at this late hour, a framework in which people can get their due without any harassment or delay or humiliation or extortion. In this day and age, that should not be possible. And that's what initial service guarantees are about. That's what citizens' charters are about, with penalties for non-performance. But that's not enough. We have to institutionalize local governments. That's not enough because we've gone too far now, money power, with muscle power, with freebies, and with divisions in society. Therefore, we must take a hard look at the electoral system. Most of these ills are because of the dependence on marginal vote in a first-past-the-post system. It doesn't matter how many votes Mr. Rane gets or Jayaprakash gets or somebody gets, how much respected the person is. What matters is if you get one more vote, you win, one less vote, you lose. There are no second prizes in politics, in our electoral system. And therefore there's a desperation before the election to garner that marginal vote to be elected. And the stakes are so high. And therefore money, power, and everything else follows. Many parties know that the economic policies pursued in the name of short-term freebies are bad for the country. But they genuinely believe that if they did not fall in line around the other political parties, they lose the 3–4% vote, and that is going to be the decider. It's not 40% vote that's going to defeat you, it's the 2–3% vote that's going to defeat you. Therefore, vote buying is necessary, freebies are necessary. If somebody says reservations to a particular community, if I stay away from that, then that community is away from me, I lose the 2% vote, therefore I lose. If somebody says Telangana, if I stay away from that, if I lose the 2% vote, I lose power in the state. Therefore, you come to the lowest common denominator. And the best and the brightest are unelectable, because without this kind of money power, without this kind of caste connections and networks, it's almost impossible to get a decent person elected today. By centralizing government, we did not enable ourselves to get the benefit of all these three linkages, and we continue to pay the price. This country can be easily set right if we really set our minds to it. Not by judging others. Mahatma Gandhi said, the best and quickest way of getting justice is rendering justice to the adversary. Do not be excessively judgmental. Understand the problem and find a solution to change the incentives. That is the way of transforming institutions. Not giving the choicest gullies to somebody and appearing to be very pious and honorable men. We are required to own up responsibility together as citizens, as activists, as public functionaries, as politicians, as judges, as everyone. And there are answers available. Sensible, practical, viable, affordable, actionable solutions are available. But do we have the courage to face the truth? Are we willing to do what is right for the country instead of indulging in blame game? Disraeli said, Gladstone said, was something very, very profound. He said the purpose of a government is to make it easy for people to do good and difficult to do evil. He started with the assumption that if everybody is moral, you don't require a government. Absolutely true. If everybody is moral, why all this? Why laws? You require a government of any kind in order to make it easy for people to do good and difficult to do evil. In politics, in judiciary, in bureaucracy, as citizens, in society. And we have not done enough to make that happen. We have to now re-engineer our incentives, restructure our governance process. No radical revolutionary changes are required. Sensible, pragmatic changes, around which there is actually a broad consensus available, if only we together as a people and the political parties in particular have the will and the skill to lead. I hope this lecture series that you have taken up in the International Center of Goa will go some way in making this debate a very purposeful one, a very meaningful one, and it will actually lead to outcomes to transform it, because we owe it to our children to make these things happen, not in the next 30 years, but in the next 3 to 5 years. Because the rest of the world is not going to wait indefinitely for us. The world is moving very fast. If we don't, India will not disappear, but we will decline, relatively speaking. It's not to our children's advantage. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Narayan, for your very, very analytical, interesting, and deeply provocative talk. I'm sure all of you are dying to ask questions now, so the floor is open.
I'm John Eric Gomes. You've given a very interesting talk, which we know all this which you have talked about, because we are aware. But the main thing is, what do we do about it? Because there's only two ways we can get rid of anything, because the politicians have to act to change anything. Now we can only change things after 5 years, or if the court throws somebody out, and that will take about 6 to 10 years. That's one. Second thing is, you said something about the judiciary versus the other two, politicians and the bureaucracy. I want to ask you, haven't the judges and the courts been more right than wrong compared to the others.
Oftentimes we think that if somebody is in power, that somebody can suddenly do things. There's nothing farther from truth. A position at best gives you a slightly better opportunity than others. Barack Obama was elected with a thumping margin in the second election, the re-election. What's he able to do? The notion that somebody as a prime minister or chief minister can automatically make great things happen is a very inaccurate notion, let me put it mildly. That's why you call some people historic. You call some people great people, because these are people who knew how to fuse a moment with a person, seized the opportunity and steered the change in societies, because they persuaded their fellow countrymen, the political system, the parties, and their own party. Everywhere in the world, that's the logic. Margaret Thatcher, you may or may not like her policies. And Abraham Lincoln, they're all regarded as more than ordinary politicians because they could actually, by the force of their personality, they seized a moment, understood the forces of history, and steered them in a manner that the society itself changed, or their own political party changed. And therefore, just because there's an election, things will not change. Elections certainly are necessary. We must change governments. We must put the fear of God into them. But we must create a public discourse and a broad understanding of what needs to be done. Many things happen when the society at large has an understanding, at least at the intellectual level. The media, the middle classes, the bureaucracy, the judiciary, if we all understand. Instead, in our country, we are all busy in this blame game. We are all busy in feathering our nest. We are all busy in indulging in self-congratulation. I am putting forth a sensible set of proposals. Nothing new, nothing spectacular, nothing very original, but a balanced set of proposals around which a consensus is possible. Take, for instance, the proportional representation. The Congress and the BJP are in deep trouble today. In all the large states of India, the 6 largest states of India, they are increasingly marginalized. Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Bihar, Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, not necessarily in that order. These states account for 55% of India's Lok Sabha seats, 291 Lok Sabha seats. In 5 of these states, in 4 of these states, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Bengal and Tamil Nadu, Congress and BJP on their own are inconsequential already. In Maharashtra, without the allies, both parties on their own don't really have much of a political space. In Andhra Pradesh, BJP had never any space. If election is held today, Congress is going to be wiped out. It may be temporary. Tomorrow, there may be some other political permutations, but right now, it is out. It's an amazing situation. In the 6 largest states of India, not any other state, in the 6 largest states of India, the 2 great national parties are inconsequential. They are not able to see that because they are steeped in day-to-day things. Whom shall I put as a governor? If in Goa I have an opposition party's government, then who should be my governor? If some other position is there, whom shall I put there? If something else is there, how do I manage today's problem or today's crisis? But they are not looking at the bigger picture. Supposing all of us in the country make them understand it's good for the country and good for you blokes. For heaven's sake, look at this seriously in the interest of the long-term viability of national politics instead of sub-regional and regional politics. Then there is a way forward. Take for instance the judicial reform. I requested the late Justice J.S. Verma, and V.R. Krishnaiyer, not because they required solutions. Sensible solutions require only 1 or 2 intelligent minds. They are available. But whatever you do with respect to judiciary is a self-serving mode, we'll say it's unconstitutional. Now, I cannot, or a government of the day cannot say the judiciary itself is unconstitutional because that means civil war. You must create a situation where judiciary cannot say that for reasonable changes. And if men of the stature of Justice Krishnaiyer and Venkatachalaya and J.S. Verma, they come together and say this is what is required to resurrect judiciary, it is unlikely that judiciary will have the temerity to say it's unconstitutional. So we have to now craft an agenda with skill. And it's for that reason that both these things are now in advanced stage. The National Judicial Commission, recently also the government made a statement that National Judicial Appointments Commission, they are saying, NGAC, it's only nomenclature, and Indian Judicial Service, both are now in the pipeline in advanced stage. Both Congress and BJP are at court. We have to systematically make this happen if we really care for this country. Each of us has a role to play. in mobilizing the community, in mobilizing the media, mobilizing the political parties in a non-adversarial manner. Be critical when it's warranted, but do not take an instinctive, judgmental position. Make things happen because you like it or not. We have to make things happen through the political parties and legislators. There is no other way of making change happen. I wish God suddenly appears as Kalki or something else and tomorrow transforms everything. That's not the way societies change. And those who want a revolution don't understand what a revolution means, for heaven's sake. And those who say we require a Cairo moment don't know that Cairo is about at least 4 generations behind us. The people of Egypt would give their right arm to be where we are today. We have lost a sense of history. There's so much going for us. Let's get the right things done quickly and sensibly. Let's not hark upon wistfully some revolution, some dramatic change of government, and tremendous instability every day, everywhere, and anarchy that flows up the country. That's not the kind of India we want.
Very, very thought-provoking. I think you are in some way, perhaps not intending to, but you are in some way trying to be an apologist for the politician. And I can understand the fact that you are a member of the Legislative Assembly, and I can understand that you have a vested interest in it. But with the greatest respect, I empathize with that gentleman over there who said that today we did not have the judiciary, and there are undoubtedly some aberration in the judiciary as well. But if it were not for the judiciary, we would not have had what has happened in the CJ, the Colgate inquiry. We would not have had what we had in the 2G inquiry. And I think with the greatest respect, the politicians have subverted the system that was given to us by our by the people, what you call the original Democrats who set up this country. I mean, I remember taking part in an election myself at the age of 16 in Bombay. We had just come as refugees there, and I was a schoolboy at St. Mary's High School. And I remember canvassing from a local member of the Legislative Assembly and going to so many houses. And I don't remember even once any money being exchanged, any money being asked for. It was a clean, thorough election. And the person I was canvassing for won the election. Today, the politicians have savaged our system. They've taken us to the pits, and you seem to be apologizing for that. See, the greatest respect. One final point, and it's a philosophical point. Do you not think, sir, that people like you, of your caliber, that you should be making common cause with people like Anna Hazare, the Kejriwal and so forth, and rising beyond the regionalism that is now affecting this country? You mentioned it yourself that today 5 states in this country are, in a centrifugal situation. Do you not think that people like you, with your politics, with your experience, with your knowledge, do you not really think that if you make common cause at the national level to dig us out of these pits, you'll go a long way?
And he'll tell you that all my life I fought these politicians. Ministers and chief ministers were terrified, literally terrified of me as a public servant. Many of us had agonizing time, months and months of agony and pain before we took a decision to found a political party. Because we realized that it's easy to blame and criticize from a distance. It's much harder to enter and to transform. So I have no vested interest. My life is noble. Before you make an assumption that somebody has a vested interest, I think you should know a little more about those persons. Do not please come to those conclusions. Okay, then it becomes a slang match. It doesn't help us. 2, what happened? If in 52 elections were wonderful, they were wonderful people, what happened subsequently? Where have these crews come from? Were they anointed by somebody? Or were they voted in by us? And why haven't the good people forsaken the politics? If the finest people, the Gandhis and the Nehrus, and the Patels and the Ambedkars, and the Sarojini Naidus, and the Maulana Azads, the best and the brightest entered into public life, what happened to that class now? They became hypocrites, cowards, run away from public space. They find sinecures for personal gain, family gain, and mouth slogans without really doing anything for the national cause. How did these people come? How did somebody become a corporator, a councillor, a legislator, and a parliamentarian? Pray tell me. Did they come by force? Did they come by the gun? Who are the ones who elected? When good people are contesting, pray tell me, how many votes are they getting? You talk about the poor. If you assume at least 15, 20 or 30% of Indians are middle class people, they're educated, they don't take money for voting, decent people must get 30% voting. Why is it not happening? And for the follies of society, you want to blame a small group of people because it is easy and convenient? Let me complete, sir. Let me complete. And the judiciary. Judges are bureaucrats. Today, it is a matter of shame that we have to actually use the epithet honest to describe an honest judge. One day I was introducing the former Chief Justice of India, known for his integrity, and Mr. Advani was there on the dais along with me. I was chairing that session. Mr. Suresh Prabhu from Maharashtra was there. And Sheila Dixit was to be there, but she could not come because of the campaign or something. And I had to say that I feel ashamed that I have to use the expression honest, epithet honest, to describe the former Chief Justice of India, because honesty is no longer taken for granted even the Chief Justice of this country. Just because the fellow is not removed from office, just because you and I don't criticize him for his dishonesty, to think that that institution is wonderful and something else is bad, we have lost our sense of purpose, because we hate politics today to the point that we become dysfunctional as a society, as a democracy. I am making this point deliberately because I want you all to think. It's easy for me to indulge in platitudes. Every institution has now become dysfunctional in many respects, and judiciary much more so. And yet, I want independence of judiciary. I have been fighting more than anybody else to fight for independence, to ensure the integrity of judiciary. I am the one who brought the local courts law in this country, after assiduous work for years. It is my work that is bringing the National Judicial Service, Indian Judicial Service, and the National Judicial Commission into this country. When I am saying this, I am saying this to restore the balance in public discourse, because we have become totally erratic in our thinking, illogical, without evidence and logic. Do you know how many judges are corrupt today? Do you have any idea? Just try, go to a court of law. Just try and get justice in the court of law today. If you have any small problem with your neighbor, I challenge you, go and get justice in the court of law. Any of you? Try it. You come back and tell me this.
I've tried it. I've tried it.
Have you had a wonderful experience?
So far.
You are a very lucky man.
So far.
No, you are singularly lucky, I can assure you. But you ask 1,000 litigants, 990 would say it was a terrible experience. So let us not put somebody on a pedestal, somebody else down. That doesn't solve the problem. Everywhere you have problems, everywhere you have good men and bad men. The answer lies in re-institutionalizing, creating a framework in which the best can flourish. That's why I said, the purpose of a government is to make it easy for people to do good and difficult to do evil. And then why not join hands with Andra Hazare and Arvind and others? Of course we joined hands. This whole anti-corruption movement started in Bangalore, in the name of Satta, started by Satta, where I and Arvind addressed. Because by the time Satta founded a political party, we did not play a very prominent, proactive public role. That's how it started. The problem with these movements is twofold. One, the notion that everybody is bad, the incapacity to find a middle ground and to find an answer which is good for the country. In 2011 December, into the parliament, an excellent bill was introduced, Lokpal legislation, an extremely sound legislation. I know, I am an authority on the subject. I was a member of the Indian Reforms Commission. It addresses 85% of the requirements that all of us have. Good sense demanded, saying, look, it's good, let's do something more. Instead, what do people say? They debunked it. What happened today as a result? A wonderful piece of legislation was allowed to be destroyed. And today, we have only half of it. Even Lokayukta is not there. That's why I quoted Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhiji said, the quickest way of getting justice is rendering justice to the adversary. Just because I am personally clean, to assume that I can utter lies in order to mobilize public opinion and moment of emotion is not an act of great integrity. Leadership requires much more than personal honesty. It requires wisdom and intellectual integrity and a capacity to understand national good. The second point, what is it that we are pursuing? Honesty is the minimum requirement in public life. It's not the maximum qualification, for heaven's sake. that we have to make honesty such an important thing itself is a tragedy for the country. There's so much more to build a country. If my purpose in politics is to go and reconnect the disconnected power connection because the fellow did not pay tariff, I oppose every single rise in petrol and diesel price, irrespective of the global and national economic situation. I oppose foreign investment in private sector, and I indulge in extreme and crass populism, undermining India's long-term interest. What kind of politics am I pursuing? What is the philosophy that I have? Let this be addressed. Anna Hazare actually used the vehicle that I am using for campaign today. He was the first one who used it. When he wanted to campaign 7 years ago in Maharashtra to mobilize public opinion against crassness in politics, then I sent my campaign vehicle without my using also. And then with some personnel and wherewithal. And he campaigned. He's a great friend and a good brother. It doesn't mean that he's right on everything. Where he's right, we're totally with him. Where he's wrong, we must have the courage to say, sorry, there's a different India way in vision.
Now the elections is just a year away. So all these good points that you have brought out, how do we translate it into the fruits? That is point one. And going back to your earlier part of the talk, where you spoke about the bureaucrats. I myself am a retired officer, grade 1, not of the civil service, but these pressures that come upon these officers, especially of grade 1 in the civil service, you have been also, you said, is tremendous. Sometimes even the most honest officer is coerced into doing something wrong. And then I guess, as a matter of habit, once you do it for the boss, then it becomes a habit, and then you say, why not I take also a cut? I've been honest, I'm doing something dishonest for the politician or the political boss. So then that corruption seeps into the officer's blood. That's the first part of this thing. But the more eminent things that, what do we do in this 1 year? Can we galvanize the crowd to do what your namesake did in 1977, Jayaprakash Narayan? He galvanized the whole of India without spending money, as you would say.
About bureaucrats being forced to be corrupt by politicians. These are easy stereotypes we all would like to believe. Self-serving arguments are very easy. I think it's time that we introspect quite a bit more. For heaven's sake. Please remember that even the lowliest of public servants in relation to the people of this country is incredibly powerful. A clerk in a Tehsil office, I don't know what you call the lower revenue officers here, a clerk in that office is more powerful than the 90% of the people of this country. In terms of his money, influence, security, in terms of data. The kind of extortion that goes on in this country, day in and day out. You try and get anything done in a government office, again, Goa may be an exception, but I'm talking about the large parts of the country. Anything done, you get a particular passbook, a title to your land. You get a birth certificate, you get a ration card, you get a power connection. A former cabinet secretary told me tales of how a former, at the time, the foreign secretary, had to pay ultimately, despite going to cabinet secretary, going to Delhi elected power, everybody, you could not get a power connection, ultimately you have to pay a bribe to get a power connection. This is the reality of this country. And now we say that bureaucrats are coerced by the politicians to be corrupt every day. Let's have a little bit of balance in public discourse. Let's be truthful to ourselves. It's not our case that politicians are really wild. But if you think that they're all crooked politicians and everybody else is beautiful, in which world are you living, please? Who will be good-making? Go to an office and get something done. If the voter registers are not proper in this country, whose fault is it? Is the politician? Which politician? Try tell me, which political party says voter registration is not good in this country? Our discourse is completely divorced from reality. We want to believe in our cocoon some irrational things. We don't want to let evidence enter.
My name is
thinking of Avik Sarkar of Calcutta. So for a moment I was trying to remember Avik Sarkar. I met him also. Go on, please.
Is it possible to make it compulsory for people eligible to vote? Because how do you demand from a government whose formation you don't take a part in? And also in this entire public discourse, I find the role of the citizen completely missing. it's as if the citizen doesn't exist and there is this body elsewhere who's doing everything, and we sort of absolve ourselves of any responsibility.
Each is necessary but not sufficient. Nation building is not something that happens just like that. It's not something that happens in 1 year. I am a terribly impatient man because intellectually it's easy to find answers. But institutionally to translate them into action is work of a generation. Relentless, patient work. Around 1950, a group called American Women Voters League, when they were all disappointed in the United States because in the 1920s when women got the vote, they all thought the country would be transformed. Nothing much happened for a generation. So these women from Philadelphia, they formed a group and they were arguing in 1950 for a simple thing. Like television became popular by 1950 in the United States. In Cincinnati, they held a press meet and they were arguing for a live televised debate of presidential candidates so that people can make informed choices. 2 correspondents appeared. It was covered on the 7th page, 8th column. It took 26 years for a mature democratic society like the United States to institutionalize live presidential debates. Real change happens like that. Sometimes in 1 year, sometimes in 10 years, sometimes in 25 years. But wise leadership is something that understands what a set of changes required, not one change. And how do you project that change which is most critical? And what is the strategy to adopt that? Why did we bring Justice Venkatachalaya and J.S. Verma and Krishna together? Krishna at the age of 97 worked with me. I admire that at that age, all alone. Sits there in his office, sits with you, looks into these things, goes into this, goes to every comma. I don't agree with him on everything. But his love and passion for the country is unprecedented. We require people like that to work assiduously but in teams. If Krishna alone said it, it would not happen. If Venkatachalaya, Krishna and J.S. Verma said it together, then it would happen. So we must make all these things happen. For each change there is a certain method of doing it. For instance, they were bringing a law on service guarantees, and our bureaucracy is wonderful in creating institutions for self-perpetuation. So they wanted a service guarantee law from the Ministry of Administrative Reforms. They wanted an electronic service delivery law from the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Each wanted a commission. Each wanted a retired civil servant to be a chairman or a member. They ensured the Senate years. Then we went before the parliamentary committee and said, if you do like this, Lutyens Delhi will be full of these bodies. You require convergence. Let's have one law and one body, preferably the Electoral Information Commission itself. I was the author of the Electoral Information Commission. We didn't anticipate that to be a simple commission to only go into updates. We can enlarge that body's role. You don't create 25 institutions, create a few institutions, but empower them adequately, ensure there is convergence. So the structure, the detailing, that negotiating, and that building the compromise. Ultimately, when I want 100, only 80 will happen. That's the real life. I am a very practical person. I am quite content for the time being with 80. I will fight for 90 tomorrow. But when I am getting 80, I will not make it 0. Because the impossible best is the enemy of the possible good. You cannot build a nation just like that. First we have to develop this understanding, this depth and clarity, based on experience, based on evidence and logic. Everything else flows from that. There are not people who will act once they know what is right.
Sir, your content was really very wonderful, very clear. And what I was really impressed with much more was the commitment in your voice, besides the content. But my reason for standing and is not with a question. Day before yesterday, there was somebody who told a story which is very similar to what you mentioned about the judiciary. I'm not saying it that I'm agreeing or disagreeing, but the fact is that people are thinking on the same lines. And the story which was told in 3 minutes was once upon a time, there were 3 pillars, the legislature, the bureaucracy and the judiciary. And today what we have is you only have the judiciary, which has grown to be such a big monster. This is the story which I'm just telling you in short, which was told to me day before yesterday at 11:30 in the night. You have today a judiciary which has grown into such a big monster that they've eaten up the functions of the legislature, they've eaten up the functions of the bureaucracy, and today instead of giving judgments more on legal lines, they are giving directions to the bureaucrats and they are giving directions for pulling up the legislature, so to say, through PILs or through other things, And therefore we need to bring this, somebody has to also grow to bring this so-called judiciary back to size. Incidentally, I am part of the judiciary also. So therefore I can stand up and say something like this, because I know very well how it works in and how it works out. And that was a wonderful statement which you made. Thank you.
So I'm Annabelle Pereira. I'm a social activist, and so I thank you very much for your enlightened talk, and I appreciate the process of transformation which you have suggested and which should be speedily done in the next few years, not wait for a decade even. Now I feel that this transformation process has to come from the political hierarchy, because the political hierarchy are given duties. Okay, there is a government now, let me take the case of Goa. There is a government which is elected government, which has won the mandate of the voter, and there are 40 MLAs or thereabouts, so 39 or whatever, and there's a cabinet of 13 ministers. They're all cabinet ministers. Unfortunately, this democracy in Goa is being turned into an oligarchy, because the cabinet ministers together make laws for the people which are, I mean, they sit every week or every month, every fortnight, and they make laws which are not the voice of the people. Now there have been movements in Goa against a lot of social issues which are condemned by the people, because like one of the things is the Panchayat Act and the Gram Sabhas, which we are very upset about, that the role of the Gram Sabhas has been diminished. We believe that the role of the Gram Sabhas is paramount, and it's the voice of the people which has to be accepted. Apart from these, there are other issues. Now let me define this as the ministers who are appointed in the cabinet. They've got a duty, and every duty has a responsibility. Now if this duty, say of a transport minister, an agriculture minister, or it's the labor minister, or it's, I mean, creating employment for the youth, all this is ignored, then who is going to take on the duties who is going to take on the priorities for Goa? Now I feel there are no priorities. It is just what goes into my pocket. For example, the MOPA issue, which is currently being raised. There is no need for MOPA. MOPA was an airport which was for Sawantwadi, and it has been brought into the Goa picture. Goa does not have the lakhs of rupees for the infrastructure for MOPA. Okay, that is one of them. Now I feel that as far as the responsibilities, that Goa is being run as an oligarchy, not a dictatorship, because these panel of 13 cabinet ministers are making the rules without the knowledge of the people.
There are two things. One, at the end of the day in a democracy, the responsibility for change rests with the political process. While politician may not be the most guilty in messing up India, the politician is most responsible to bring about changes in India. And to the extent that they fail, they are the most guilty. And therefore you cannot really make some other branch responsible for delivering out of the political crisis or governance crisis. The second thing is, centralization always breeds both inefficiency and corruption, and also distorted policies. Unfortunately, we created a framework, even in small states like Goa, regime, where people love centralization. I think we have to recognize the importance of decentralization with communities in an accountable and responsible manner being empowered. That is not really giving up something, that's actually gaining something. There was a time when states were very feeble in this country. Government of India was all powerful. But eventually in the past 20 years, federalism came into its own. But Delhi's role has not diminished. It became different. Delhi no longer decides which factory should come where, who should get what license. But Delhi decides other much more important things. Therefore its importance is not diminished. And yet states now can come into their own. A similar process must happen to the third tier of federalism. Unless the state governments realize that when they empower the local governments, they are not getting diminished, but they are going to find a more meaningful, more creative, more leadership role, we will have this problem. For that, there are many changes required. One of them is, for instance, how to make legislators do legitimate work. If legislative committees are not there which are empowered to enforce accountability and to shape public policy, then all that the legislators have to do is raise their hands whenever they're asked to do so under the 10th schedule of the Constitution. They have no role at all. Now, after spending crores and crores of rupees to go to legislature, ask them to raise their hands or lower their hands, then what do they do? Power will always take a perverted course. If you actually give positive content to power, then there are the chances that leadership will develop and they will have actually a creative role. We haven't done those things. There are many institutional changes that are required to make them happen. One last word on this issue is, once you elect a government, you do not like the policy they pursue, but as long as it's within the framework of the Constitution and the law that they themselves have created, we have to accept it. Because once I have given my vote, ask them to deliver and shape policies and make decisions, then I cannot every day say, let there be different. Whether it's in a village, or a municipality, or a city, or a district, or a state, or the nation. This is a broader principle. In our country, we have so much of distaste of those in office that every day, every hour, and every issue we want to second guess them. We have to expect them to conform to the law of the land and the Constitution, to be accountable. But we cannot expect them not to exercise their judgment in public policy and go back to people and say, this is what we have done, why? Now you decide whether we deserve to get another mandate or not. That's the only way politics will work. Otherwise, all governments will collapse. In our country, we make governments increasingly dysfunctional because they get elected today, 24 hours later, the first demand of the leader of opposition is, I don't know about Goa, resign. 24 hours, resign. We cannot have that. We have to have some discipline. Vote is a serious issue. You give a vote, as long as they function within the contours of democracy and law and constitution, vote is substantive, you have transferred the power, and they must take decisions. And you will live with the consequences. You cannot have a dharna every day, you cannot have a morcha every day. You can mobilize public opinion, but through democratic process, not through obstructions. That is the part of democracy. Otherwise, nobody can govern. The country will be anarchic. That's what India mostly is.
I am Principal Bhanumurthy. Sir, you said many things about the system. We are very happy. Politicians, villains, we have seen many villains. Now, the word is victims now. Many of the ministers from central government have resigned, are made to resign. And I think latest is Andra Pradesh, where the Home Minister and the Revenue Minister resigned. Whether their resignation accepted or not, I don't know. Then what are these people? Are they really victims? Or both villains and victims?
Dr. Identity Aam Aadmi. Okay, so I have a question. And first of all, I should thank you for a wonderful talk by a person with a high integrity attitude. Because we hear such talks, but integrity is very questionable. Anyway, well, my question is, you talked at least 6 to 7 times. You said in your talk that the local government or local governing bodies like panchayat and municipalities. So these are the places where the strong leaders, honest leaders, moral leaders, high moral and high integrity should come, and that can be the India, right? You also mentioned in your talk that the legislators or the MPs or the parliamentary are the ones who suppress them, or are the ones who become obstruction in their way. And if that is so, then the title of the talk is very much valid. The politicians are the villains, and also politicians who come from this, who face obstructions and hence cannot move up, are the victims. What's the solution to this problem?
I have a special problem. Many people like me in the country have a special problem. When I speak in Andhra Pradesh Legislature, I am listened to with total respect and with pin drop silence. Nobody is given that kind of respect. Not Chief Minister, not Leader of Opposition, nobody. After listening to me, great respect and in total silence, they all pretend as if they're not heard me at all, and they go about their business now. On some critical issues, because the evidence is so compelling, and they see that public mood also is slowly but steadily changing. In about 2 to 3 years' time, what you've been arguing becomes slowly their policy. Look, politicians never give credit to somebody else. Politics is about the most competitive of all enterprises. Because in general market, if you give somebody else 10% share, you survive, he survives. Here there is no such thing. It's a no holds barred fight. Therefore, we must accept that. Doesn't matter who gets the credit. I long ago realized that if there is a God, God makes great things happen through people who do not care who get the credit. You must focus on the outcomes. It doesn't matter in whose name they're happening. But that's the way it is. So when I'm with a group of politicians, they're very uncomfortable with me. But because of the track record and the credibility, they're very silent, very respectful. But try and ignore as much as possible. When I'm with bureaucrats, they're uncomfortable with me. Again, they try and ignore as much as possible. When I'm with civil society groups, they're uncomfortable with me. They try and ignore this because we don't want to face truth. We have become a hypocritical society, selectively applying truth for self-serving purposes. I'm using harsh language. The reason why I used harsh language today, the reason why I'm very provocative, including the title, is to just make us all sit up and take notice and think. The shibboleths, the standard expressions, these meaningless attitudes, they don't help us. We must be sharp. We must be uncompromising. We must recognize merit and good where it exists. We must attack something that's wrong where that exists. Uncompromising. We cannot always abdicate responsibility and pretend that we are all good guys and doing the right thing, everybody else is doing the wrong thing. That doesn't solve it. That's not the way a community functions. That's not the way a society actually fosters the future. And that's the context in which I said what I have to say. The reason why I believe local governments are so important is that is where there is fusion of authority with accountability. If you want to take home one single idea, it is this. Wherever there is clear fusion of authority with accountability, things will happen very well. That's why certain functionaries, in certain functions, they do well. The same fellows, sometimes crooked fellows, take the election commission. I have known in the past 20 years every single election commissioner, many of them intimate. Some of them are crooks. But the commission did a great job because there is a clear fusion of authority with accountability and there is a certain amount of public expectation and public is acting as a watchdog. Therefore, even crooked commissioners are not able to undermine the system. The way you design the system, the way you keep a watch. These are the two safeguards. Don't expect moral giants to be there. Somehow we have a notion in India that moral giants will be there everywhere and they'll all solve the problems of India. No. Election Commission is a good example. There are no moral giants. You take it from me. Anybody who understands bureaucracy, I'm sure Mr. Dubasha knows very well, many of these people. And yet they serve the country well. Institutional design does not always depend on individual morality. It's necessary, it's desirable. But even if there is a shortcoming there, the nation cannot be allowed to suffer. And public must be acting as watchdogs. The politician is obviously a villain, that is a self-evident proposition. But there is much more to it than his villainy is what I am trying to convey. And unless we set it right, your and my debunking them and abusing them and accusing them and giving them galleys will not change anything. It will only give us a sore throat. Let us find an answer. Why is it happening the way it is happening? And what is the way to change incentives? Again, go back to Gladstone said it. The purpose of a government is to make it easy for people to do good and difficult to do evil. It's an extraordinarily profound statement. It's pregnant with meaning. We have to go deeper. That's why the design of the Indian state, the structure, the way you build the checks and balances, the way you ensure that the best outcome is possible, that is a real challenge. That requires deep understanding, insights, expertise, passion, and compassion, and empathy, not excessive judgment. We have in our country excessive judgment, very little empathy, and hardly no wisdom. Hardly any wisdom. It's time that we set right the balance. And the middle classes owe it to themselves. Middle classes have abdicated, even intellectually they have abdicated. Everywhere in the country there are standard responses. There are standard solutions. Standard approaches, standard words. Evidence and logic be damned. If we come to predetermined conclusions without logic and evidence, then there's something wrong in a society. We require rational public debate, reasoned public debate, on public policy, on politics, on judiciary, on bureaucracy, whether it's food security bill or employment guarantee act, whether it's FDI in retail trade or genetically modified seeds. And 100 things. In this country, there's too much of knee-jerk response. We owe it to ourselves to have much deeper, considered response based on evidence and logic, common sense and wisdom. And that's what I'm arguing about working as. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Narayan. You've given us enough food for thought. And I think each thought of yours could be made into a seminar for us. And thank you so much. The words are not enough to express. So may I kindly ask Mr. Rane. Mr. Rane, can I ask you to please give this little token of... Thank you so much for coming.